Benjamin Netanyahu continues to remain defiant despite the fact that there are massive protests taking place in his country. As you know, thousands of people took to the streets in Israel. I mean, Israel has been just filled with protests for a very long time. Even before October 7th, people were protesting in Israel. And the reason that they were protesting in Israel is because they've been upset with the way that Benjamin Netanyahu has undermined their vision of democracy. Put a pin in that, their vision of democracy. But the protests have gotten even more intense in the months following October 7th, as people are incredibly dissatisfied with how Prime Minister Netanyahu has handled the issue. And so in the last day or two, thousands more have taken to the streets. They're calling for a ceasefire. They're calling for a hostage deal. The most recent wave of protests, of course, are prompted by the deaths of 6 hostages who were held in Gaza. And so now y'all's friend, somebody's friend, ain't our friend, Benjamin Netanyahu, has been facing really strong calls to resign. And in response to those calls to resign, Netanyahu has basically been defiant. He has remained obstinate. He says he's not stepping down. In fact, he went on national television to lecture the Israeli public. Make sure you check this out. Try and get a translator. He did this in Hebrew to explain why he refuses to pull out of Gaza. I mean, he pulled out a map. He broke it down. He said that the sticking point is the Philadelphia quarter, or the Philadelphia quarter. Netanyahu says that Israel must control Gaza's Philadelphia corridor because it is what he calls a, quote, Hamas lifeline. He says that Israeli troops need to stay there to ensure their security. So for Netanyahu, a permanent military presence, a policing of the border is absolutely necessary for Israel to continue to meet its goals. I mean, he looked ridiculous there with the map and the pointer. I haven't seen anything this ridiculous since a similar set of visual aids were brought to the international community before the invasion of Iraq. But the tragedy is, no matter how ridiculous Netanyahu looks, no matter how dishonest the analysis is, and we'll get there, it doesn't negate the fact that real danger is occurring and that many people in the Israeli public are, in fact, supporting him. Not everybody. There are people who are actively saying, shut it down. We saw the proposal of a general strike that almost took place, although the court shut it down earlier today in Israel. But at the end of the day, there's still a strong right-wing movement that does not care what happens to Palestinian lives. There's a strong right-wing movement in Israel that does not care if this quote-unquote war goes on forever. And so this places the United States in a powerful position and in a crucial position. And the reason why I'm bringing up the United States once again is because there are many people out there who would say, and who do say when they watch this show, why do you keep talking about Israel? Why are you obsessed with Israel? Why are you focused on Israel? This is very clearly and indisputably an American foreign policy issue, an American public policy issue, and in some ways an American domestic policy issue, to the extent that we're making particular decisions about what to do here based on what we're doing there. Let me be more specific, if I can be. Netanyahu right now is prosecuting a war that can only happen, that can only exist, that can only be successfully maintained with U.S. dollars, with U.S. money, with U.S. resources, not just money, but also weapons, also political cover. This only happens. There was an expert who came out just today who said, if the U.S. were to pull out of this, Israel could last a few days, maybe a week. So against the backdrop of that, it's very challenging to not focus on President Biden. And in fact, it was an Israeli Air Force officer. Let me be precise, because we're in night school. I got to tell the truth. he told Haaretz that without U.S. aid, Israel couldn't fight Gaza beyond a few months. So Israel could go a few months without U.S. support, but we 10 months in, not 11 months in on Friday or Thursday, right? So, is that right? Saturday, excuse me. But the point is, we're basically 11 months in. So yeah, slowing this thing to a halt by the U.S. pulling out would make sense. But when they go to President Biden, as they often do, in fact, they asked President Biden this morning if he thought Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was doing enough to secure a hostage deal and a ceasefire with Hamas, and his response was no. But he says the United States is not giving up. Here is why this is problematic. There's several reasons why this is problematic, but I'm going to get into the nitty gritty of it. First, and maybe most importantly, as we talk about the Israeli protests, as we talk about the people in the streets of Israel who are demanding a ceasefire and a hostage deal, we have to be very clear about what they're fighting for and what they're not fighting for. Calling for the hostages to be returned makes sense. If you have family, friends, or just countrymen and women who are captive, you call for their release. If you just think capturing innocent people or civilians at least is wrong, you call for their release. I happen to not believe that you should capture civilians. I happen to believe that that's just kidnapping. That's not prisoners of war, that's kidnapping. There's nothing wrong with calling for a hostage deal, and there's nothing wrong for calling for a ceasefire purely to get a hostage deal. But we have to be very clear that Israeli civil society, the general public in Israel, is not calling for a ceasefire because they care about Palestinian lives. They're fine with the continued military presence. They're fine with an indefinite occupation. They've been fine with the ongoing siege. These are not liberals. These are not even progressive. These are not progressives. These are not even liberals. These are liberal Zionists who are very much committed to a democracy in Israel that still allows it to maintain an ethno state. Again, the people are calling for Netanyahu to step out of office and to resign or to be pushed out because he is anti-democratic. They don't want Netanyahu, but they also aren't so upset with how Palestinians are being treated. And then you might say, how do you know what they think? I'm basing this on opinion polling. I'm basing this on how they feel about Palestinian leadership, how they feel about Palestinian everyday citizens, what they think Israel's continued role should be. If you look at how they've talked about the amount of violence that's been used in Gaza, where they think it should be more or less or the same amount of violence used, these questions reveal that Israeli civil society is asking for a more democratic space, but that democracy does not include the Palestinians who live in the West Bank, who live in East Jerusalem, who live in the Golan, who live in Gaza. That is the point. And so we have to be honest about that. We have to be clear about that. And so we can't expect public protest to fix this. And Biden is saying, well, yeah, you know, Netanyahu's not doing enough. Good for you, Biden. That's the biggest profiling courage you'll ever offer on this issue, right? Is to say he's not doing enough to get a ceasefire. But again, for him, a ceasefire is good for business. For him, a hostage deal is good for business. But he's not calling for a fundamental restructuring of a society that still gives different privileges and rights and freedoms based on what your ethnic, national, or religious identity is. We need a true secular democracy, and Biden doesn't believe that. Biden has been very clear that he himself is a Zionist. So this is the context. So what do you do? Well, there are models. We're starting to see it chipping away. Just today, officials in the UK immediately suspended 30 of its 350 arms exports licenses to Israel because of the, quote, clear risk of violation of international humanitarian law. In other words, we can't keep giving you weapons because it's clear that you're going to break the law with them. More than 40,000 people have been killed in Gaza. We know this. It's an ongoing genocide. And as the number goes up, at some point, somebody has to do something. Now, the British foreign minister says it's not an embargo, God forbid, but at least it's a step in the right direction. Hopefully, the United States can begin a step in the right direction. And if the United States does not move a step in the right direction at a moment where Netanyahu is not letting up, he's not softening, he's not relenting, he is doubling down and justifying it. If we don't apply more pressure, we got more blood on our hands than anybody else. And then when I'm saying we right now, I'm talking about the global community. Every nation that does not issue a weapons embargo, every nation that does not stop sending money, every nation that abstains or vetoes votes that hold Israel accountable, we're all responsible. We all got blood on our hands. And so keep the pressure on. And it's not just on Biden. Right now, Kamala Harris, that pressure needs to be on Kamala Harris as well. We need to ask Kamala Harris what her position is on Netanyahu. We have to ask what the position is on weapons to Israel. She's already said she's not going to have an embargo. She's been unequivocal about that. But is there a way to thread this needle similar to what the UK has just done so that at the very least, weapons aren't going to be exported right now that are going to lead to more war crimes? Can we at least ask for that? Is that too low a bar? What can we get?